in-person events just because people travel, get into workshops and whatnot. But I think just for the purposes of making sure we have enough time to get through the material and that hopefully people can ask questions at the end, um, I want to go ahead and start. So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Aaron McKeever. I'm one of the leads on the Upskilling Labs programming and events team. I want to thank you on behalf of Upskilling Labs for joining us during your lunchtime or whatever you're doing at this beautiful hour here in DC. And coming for this lecture by Eric Meniefield. Before I introduce Eric, I want to give some more information about the Upskilling Labs, if this is the first time that you're joining us. We're an organization with our current main branch based in DC. We're born out of a partnership between the DC Public Library and Levy, and aimed at the goal of providing upskilling to workers displaced by a variety of different circumstances, but also just interested in community building and providing a space for people to learn about new technologies and tackle interesting problems. We are currently closing our first open cohort build cycle, and if you're based in DC, we will have a summit and presentation day at the MLK Library downtown on April 14th. So you can find that on Luma if that sounds interesting to you and you'd like to see more and hear more about what we do. We also host a variety of workshops and community building events, so please be sure to follow us for any of those. We're very glad to have Eric here joining us from sunny, I guess not so sunny California today. For those of you who haven't heard Eric's bio in the Luma, I'm just going to briefly highlight that he's the founder and executive director of Works Incorporated, a workforce innovation nonprofit focused on expanding economic mobility for emerging creators and entrepreneurs from underserved communities. With a background in UX design and business development, Eric works at the intersection of psychology and technology to help young people build real-world skills through hands-on projects and industry partnerships. We're very glad to have him. Dr. Tati put us in contact, and we hope this is the first of many. Just before we begin, some quick housekeeping rules. There will be some opportunities at the beginning to chime in and give a response to Eric's questions. If you use the raise hand function, I can make you a contributor so you can turn on your audio. We just want to make sure that people are keeping off their mics so that if we have a recording for this for people to view later, that everything goes smoothly and that we have a nice clean presentation to share. And if at any point during the presentation you have a question, feel free to put that in the chat. I like to put little parentheses around like the title of the slide before putting in the question, just so we know at the end where to come back to. But if you have anything that's pressing during one of the slides, raise your hand and I'll sure to be bring it up to Eric's attention, just so we can try and answer it. But otherwise, please put it in the chat and we'll try to get to it at the end. Thank you so much. And Eric, the presentation is yours.
Wonderful. Yeah, thanks, Aaron, for the warm introduction. Hello to everyone on the call. I'm very excited to be here today. Yeah, I just wanted to, just thank the Upskilling Labs team, the leadership team, for this opportunity. So Dr. Tati, Aaron, Courtney, Mandu, Sandra, you all have been very welcoming and accommodating to me. And so, yeah, this is an extreme privilege. I love to talk about design. I love to design. This is something that I'm very passionate about. And yes, this is one of those situations where, you get an opportunity to live your dream. And that's kind of the space that I'm living in right now. So very thankful. I also want to shout out Cassidy Cox, who's our strategic partnership coordinator. She may be on the call right now. And so thank you, Cassidy, for all of your support with the Works community. I really appreciate you, and thanks for being here. And so, yeah, again, I just really feel blessed and fortunate to be on this call. And I'm going to share a couple things with you today regarding UX. Yeah, and so, again, my name is Eric Meniefield. I've been working in user experience design, product design for the last 10 years. I got my start over at this small software development company called Pivotal Software. And we worked with consulting the Fortune 500 companies on their legacy software systems, so helping them convert over into the cloud. I worked at UCLA for a little while as a user experience researcher, among other things. I think I did everything besides uh, actually becoming a physician or a nurse there. But I really loved just working in the healthcare environment. A lot of people are sick and hurting, and I'm just that, loving, nurturing person that really just loves to, help out where I can. And then my baby here, Works Incorporated. I founded this project back in 2018, and it started as a simple mentorship program where, I really wanted to get to know some of the youth in the neighborhood and some of the challenges that they were facing. And as I did that, I learned a few things about their goals and aspirations as young creators. And just it kind of, worked out to where I was working on my design career. And I started to apply some of that framework and thinking into the program. And it began to morph into more of a tech agency where we provide user experience design and content strategy, workforce development, and also business development to these early career creators and local entrepreneurs. And so again, really feel fortunate about the opportunities that have come my way, and just try to seize every moment of it. So for today's workshop, if you guys can, please scan this QR code. This is going to give you access to the materials for today. And so this is going to take you over, this link or this QR code is going to take you over to a folder. And in that folder is two folders. One, there's a survey. So at the end of this workshop, if you can complete that survey and let me know your feedback, I would really appreciate that. And then as well, there's a research plan document where you would have access to developing your own or designing your own research plan based on the information that we received today. And so hopefully that's helpful for you as you all are working on your own products and designing your own apps. And so, yeah, let's get into it. What are we going to talk about today? So we'll look at what UX design is. So what is UX? We'll talk about how to actually UX it. Again, coming from this at a very high level, we'll look at the design process from a UX standpoint. We'll talk about why UX is important, and then we'll look at what UX research is. And a big part of that is really just trying to validate some of the things that we're assuming, and applying a framework and processes to do that, right? Like, how do we validate? How do we get through some of the things that we assume about designing a product, service, so on and so forth. And so when I think about outcomes, I think about the changes in the world that I want to see. I think about how I'm improving someone's life, or how I'm causing harm to someone's life, right? So unintentionally, right? Like, how are the design decisions that I'm making either improving someone's life or harming someone's life? And so for the sake of this call, some of the outcomes that we're looking for are to develop an understanding of what UX is and what it is not by real world examples. Again, we want you guys to have a high level overview of what the UX design process is, and then you'll be equipped to create your own research plan. So as I was thinking about how to set up this talk, I thought it would be a good idea for some of us to describe a product or service that you either love or hate. I know hate is a strong word. Love is actually a strong word too, but we can kind of think about that internally. We don't necessarily have to have anyone speak on that, but I think just kind of going through the process of thinking about an experience that you love, right? What is it? You can either put in a chat, you can share what you love about it, share why you love it, right? Describe your favorite part about it. And then we want you to recall an unpleasant moment, right? So about an experience that you might not like so much, or that you may feel strongly that you don't like, right? That you may hate. So what is that? What's frustrating? What's frustrating about it, right? And so this activity is intended to help you frame UX through a real world emotion and function, right? And so we'll talk more about what UX is in terms of the actual experience that we have as people going through a product or service, right? So let's get into it. What is it? What is UX design? So first of all, we want to say that UX is not UI, right? And I think in the industry now, when we see job postings, we see a lot of job titles that say UX UI designer. And particularly for me and some of my colleagues, we kind of find that frustrating because we understand that UX is not UI. And I think what people are implying that we want someone to come in and help visually design the experience of our app. But the how do you articulate that, right? How do you articulate that we're looking for a visual designer, interface designer, or a user experience designer who's able to design interfaces, but also think about the business as right and the customers as a whole as well. And so if we were to look at some differences, right, if we were to compare what a user interface is versus a user experience is, so on the left here, we have a picture of an interface, right? And this is the interface of maybe, let's say, like an Airbnb or some kind of travel accommodation app, right? So first, a basic definition of what a user interface would be is it's a part of a product that people may interact with, right? So it includes everything a user sees and touches, like buttons, menus, the actual screen, the icons, the layouts, right? These are what allow you to navigate or complete tasks within this system or within this product. And then on the left, you have the actual experience, right? And so you have this couple who seem to be planning like a trip together, right? So when we think about the user experience, we're thinking about what people are feeling, what they're doing, what they're saying, and what they're thinking, right? And so these are the emotional components, right, of what makes up the actual experience. And so what are we thinking? What are we feeling? What are we doing? What are we saying? How does that all like culminate into the user's experience? And again, here's another example of the difference between the UX and the UI, or UI and UX, right? I wish this was my car, but anyway, so we have the interface of a Porsche, right? Where you have the steering wheel, you have the console, you have like the dashboard with all of the controls. This is what is allowing the person to actually interact with the car, control the car, drive the car. But what are they thinking? What is she thinking as she's driving this car, right? What is she feeling? Um, what is that actual experience like, and um, how do you how do you design for that? How do you design within that context? And then the last example, and these are like some common examples that I tried to find, but on the left here, you have a remote control, right? Again, the interface that allows you to control the TV, right? And so on the left, you have the remote, and on the right, you have this family who are, enjoying themselves, right? They're trying to find something to watch. If it was me, I would probably have a 10-piece wing in front of me, right? And so just like that's the experience. What am I thinking? I want to watch something good while I enjoy my meal, right? So what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What am I doing? So these are some differences between the UX and the UI, and how we kind of process that in real time. And so, again, what is UX? We're looking at UX from the standpoint of the user, of the business, and then also the constraints, right? So there's always going to be constraints in your design project. I don't think we live in a perfect world, so there's never going to be a perfect, environment to design within, right? But what are the user needs? What are the business goals, right? And what are the constraints that we have to design within? And so I'm going to share some definitions from some industry leaders. And so one definition is your user experience design is a process used to create products that provide meaningful and relevant experiences to users, right? It includes the aspect of branding, design, usability, function. And so here it's hinting on, how people interact with the brand. How does the brand make you feel? How do you relate to the brand? The aesthetic, right? The usability and function of it. Another definition from the Nielsen Norman Group is user experience encompasses all aspects of the end user interaction with the company. So with the company, its services and its products, right? So UX is about delivering a seamless, efficient, and delightful experience across all touch points, right? And so one tool that we use to kind of um, see the touch points, right, between the user and the business is a service blueprint, right, a journey map. And so these things allow us to map out the entire experience and see the different touch points between the people, the customers, right, and all of the functions in the back end of technology that has to work in order for the experience to work or for the customers to accomplish their task or the business to reach their goals. And here's a definition that I kind of butchered a little bit, but UX design is the process of aligning business goals with user needs, right? So what are your goals as a business and how does that filter into solving the problems or the needs for your users, right? I think in today's world, things are expected to look good. Things are expected to work, right, for the most part. But I think the real art lies in making sure that it works well and that it delivers a meaningful and delightful experience for the right people in the right place at the right time, right? And so where are these people? Who are they? How can we deliver the right message to them, the right content to them, where they need it the most? And so how is it defined? I think it means different things, right, to different people. So user experience, the customers and or users is the emotional and functional response to interactions with the experience, both real world and digital. Experiences can take place on a website with software, in the store, via email, or simply through exposure to a brand. And so again, just kind of reinforcing some of those things, right? The brand is important. The messaging is important. The layout, all of these things are important to the actual user's experience. Um, so again, what are customers thinking about? What are they feeling? What are they saying? What are they doing? So here's another example of the difference between a user interface and a user experience. This is more specific to like a healthcare scenario, right? Where a user and so a patient and a doctor are interacting through this app, right? And this Epic My Chart. And so what could be a potential scenario here? It looks like, maybe this patient is trying to understand her medication, right? So she might be confused a little bit and need some instructions on how to take it, maybe when to take it, some side effects, right? And so maybe she's use this app to call her doctor or schedule an appointment with her doctor to, get some clarification on how to move forward with taking her medication, right? So on the left, we have this interface with multiple features, providing direct access to her medical team. And on the right, we have these two users, in this case, a lady trying to understand her medication and a doctor trying to support her via a video call or a medical call, telehealth. There you go, a telehealth call. And so this user interface is kind of the middle person between conducting this patient visit, right? And so that the experience is how the users are feeling as they're interacting with this app. And again, so it means different things to different people. So to a business, right? A user UX can be a component of business strategy that leverages insight gained from either customers or internal stakeholders in order to validate or solve a business problem, right? So it can save money, it can save time by identifying and correcting potential costly inefficiencies to a customer's journey. Right. So an example of this, I work with startup bakeries primarily for my work. And so if we were to use an example of an e-commerce bakery that keeps that they're seeing a lot of drop-offs on their websites, or that when it comes to checkout, right? So people get all the way up to the checkout and they leave their cart full of cupcakes and pastries. And so why is that? Why aren't they checking out? Why aren't they completing that task? So we can conduct a usability test with a shopper, right? So we'll set up an interview and watch them actually. We'll give them a task and say, hey, we want you to purchase 2 dozen cupcakes, right? And so we'll set up a usability test and we'll actually observe them going through the process. And as we observe them going through the process, we notice that the shipping fees for the product isn't included until right up until they're about to check out. And so they'll see the price of the cupcakes, but they won't see the actual shipping costs until later. And so obviously that's going to drive up the price. And at that point, they're like, I don't want to pay an extra $20 or $30 to have this shipped. And so how can we be more transparent with pricing up front or sooner in the journey so that they can make up their mind a lot quicker, right? And so, we can design a solution around how to, inform users and be more transparent about pricing up front. That way they don't get so far within the checkout journey, without making a purchase. So that's kind of, again, an example of how we would use user experience design to identify pain points within a customer journey. And so if we're looking at, again, how is user experience design defined by a business, excuse me. If we're looking at this MyChart app or this Flow app, right, what would be some of these goals? What would be the goals of like these companies? Why do these apps exist, right? And so for MyChart, it's a digital health portal that allows patients to access their medical records, right? So we want to give people digital access to their medical records. That way they don't have to, request them a month ahead of time, right? And so it allows people to communicate with their health providers, manage their appointments and care all in one place, right? And so their goal is to streamline the process of people interacting with their healthcare services. And for this Flow app, right, it's a personalized health tracking app designed to help individuals monitor their menstrual cycles, right, their ovulation cycles, or however you would say that, and then overall just reproductive health, right? And so primarily, I guess for women, right, this app is used to help them kind of keep track of their normal health, right? Their menstrual cycles, their ovulation, and all of these other things, right? And so how do these goals kind of so these are the goals of these companies. And again, feel free to put your questions in the chat as they come up, and we'll try to get to them towards the end of the presentation. And so how do we actually UX? What does that mean? How do we do the work, right? And so components of user experience design is one, research, right? How do you gather information? And so we conduct interviews, we produce or create surveys, we develop personas. Personas are one of my favorite um, components about design because it helps you to center yourself around the actual user. And so what are their behaviors? What are their demographics? What are their needs, right? What are their wants and their needs? And how do you design around those needs, which are essentially like their problems to solve, right? Then the interface and interaction design is where we focus on how users interact with the product or service. And so again, as user experience designers, we have a pretty robust tool belt of tools that we use to actually design this experience. So visual design, typography, branding, interaction design, prototyping, task flows. And again, in the appendix of the slide deck, there are a lot more tools that I share with you there. And so these are just a couple bullet points to kind of give, again, like a high level overview, but then going into heuristics, right, and usability. So this is centered around evaluating the usability and intuitiveness of a design. And so using like these rules of thumbs and best practices, right? So how do people know where they are on a web page? And so things like status bars, navigation, menus, so on and so forth, right? And then content strategy. There's a difference between content strategy and information architecture. However, I would categorize or organize information architecture within content strategy. And I think, the purpose of that is content strategy, content are any pretty much any information, right, related to your customers, your messaging, right? How do you communicate? And you kind of want to think about the content while you're designing the actual experience, right? So you want to think about upfront the messaging that you're using. You want to think about some of the tags or keywords that you're using within your messaging. You want to think about how that's going to play into um, the search engine, right? And I think even more so nowadays, we're using um, these AI systems to help us do more advanced searches, right? And so how does an SEO play into things like artificial intelligence? And so I think it's really important to think about content strategy up front versus information architecture, where you're organizing the information on the page and um, uh, you know yeah. And so more details on that to come. I think, specifically, I'm not an expert in content strategy, but it is a part of the design process. And I think it's healthy to practice content strategy early on in the design process. And so when we look at UX design, there's also layers to like the structure, right? And so we'll say like the bottom layer starts at like the strategy, and then the surface, or all the way up to the surface, right? So the strategy includes are essentially based on the business goals, all the way up to like the visual rendering of that. And so what are the business goals? Most business goals are centered around four major components, right, of the operation. And so in my opinion, I would say most businesses focus on, revenue or cost, right? So how do we increase revenue? How do we decrease our cost? Who are our customers? How do we attract new customers? How do we engage with existing customers? Staff, right? Like, so who do we need to hire? How do we find the right fit for the roles? And then the community and culture, right? So how does our company show up within the community? What does that interaction look like? And so, again, in my opinion, those, outside of like research and development, I think that kind of folds into it. I think prioritizing those as your goals will kind of impact how you design your experience, right? And so Again, just kind of looking at each layer from the strategy to the scope, to the structure, to the skeleton, right? And so I would say, the scope is trying to figure out like, um, you know, um, how do we, or what are we actually doing within a allotted time frame, right? What do we have the bandwidth to do? How do we kind of gather the research about the technology, about the people, X, Y, and Z, and then you would kind of go from that into, figuring out like the different flows, wireframing, prototyping, all the way up to like this service level. And so why is user experience important? Um, so when we look at the user's experience, we can measure their experience over the course of time, and then also from this frustrating state to a delightful state, right? And so Jared Spool, he's one of my internet mentors. I actually had a chance to meet him once before, and it was he gave a talk at Disney. And this is just a little funny story. I'm kind of going on a tangent, but he was over at the reception area, and he's kind of stuffing his plate. And I made a joke about him kind of stuffing his plate, and he just kind of gave me this death stare. So that's a pretty funny memory that I have. I kind of just like turned and walked away. But he's a really knowledgeable designer. And I really like how he centers or frames his thinking around user experience. Poor UX, right, is anything that's frustrating for the user, right? So poor UX misses expectations. It doesn't meet the needs of the users, and incurs cost, right? And so it's costing you money. It's not meeting expectations, and it's not fulfilling the needs of the users, right? So a good UX, it meets the expectations and it meets the needs, right? So this line of satisfaction, that's kind of like the baseline of you're just barely meeting the mark, right? But our goal, our job is to create good UX and even great UX, right? So we want to exceed expectations and we want to anticipate needs, right? And so the more delightful, the better the experience, the more value you're adding to your product and service, right? So you can add some value or you can add much more value by designing a good and great experience. So let's look at this scenario with Paula. So Paula is a busy professional in her mid-30s. She hasn't had a checkup in over a year. After noticing minor changes in her health, she schedules a doctor's appointment to understand what's going on, hoping to gain peace of mind before things got worse, right, or get worse. And so Paula, she's been working so hard for the last few years, with her career and not really giving a lot of attention to her health. And so she notices some changes and wants to get checked out. And so let's look at her experience. What is her journey, right? And so when we look at a user's experience or user journey, right, we always want to kind of start from this like awareness state, right? What are they doing before interacting with your product, and then also what are they doing after interacting with your product? And so this journey map kind of highlights the variation in her experience, and we use kind of like these emojis to kind of highlight what she's feeling in the time at each stage. And also you can see like this is measured over time, right? And so when she became aware that she wasn't feeling too great, something's going on, she wasn't feeling too well, right? And so this is what kind of probed her to seek medical attention, right? She was able to do a quick search and find a doctor. And so she was feeling good about it. Hey, I got an appointment, although it's going to take her a month, like she had to schedule this a month ahead of time, right? Once she actually arrives at the clinic, she's not so happy because one, she had to wait 3.5 hours And during this 3.5 hour wait, the paperwork could have been confusing. Maybe they were more busy than anticipated. And so she had an appointment, but she wasn't seen on time. And so a lot of complications up front once she actually got to the clinic. And so this is kind of contributing to her having this negative or frustrating experience at the doctor's office once she's got there. But then she starts to feel a little better because she actually got into her consultation. So she was able to see her doctor and ask all the questions that she needed to ask. And this was a quick, 30-minute session, right? So she was in and out with the doctor, but then she had to go back to the lobby for her post-visit reception. And so she had to, do some follow-up labs and tests and figure out her medication. She had to go to the pharmacy. So all of these things kind of took her another hour and a half just to kind of, settle the things that her and her doctor talked about. And then she finally was able to get out of there, right? And so, again, once she got back into the reception area and had to go through all of the post visit procedures, this kind of weighed negatively on her experience, right? And kind of caused a little bit more frustration. And so by the time she left, she was just relieved to get out of there. She was like, okay, I saw the doctor. I'm good. I can go home and, continue my life, right? And so all of these like scribbles, this is the work that needs to be done, right? How do we take this frustrating experience and turn it into a more delightful experience, right? And so this is where we would do a lot of our research, right, to identify the pain points. Is it something, within the paperwork when she arrives, right? Like, what are the benefits in terms of streamlining this flow for a patient to get in and out of their doctor's visit? Yeah. So let's look at the design process as a whole. This is a image that kind of shares the design process from the scoping. So this is again trying to get an understanding of the scope of work, right? And so what are we designing for? What are some of the initial problems that either the client is seeing, like why are they coming to see us? Why are we working together? So once we come up with a scope of work, we've talked through the time, the budget, and the resources that may be needed. We'll jump right into a kickoff, right? And so this kickoff will lead us into a discovery and framing session. And for us, or for me, I like to work in like an agile format, and so we can also break this down into a couple weeks sprint, so maybe 2 week sprints. So 4 weeks total of discovery, 2 weeks of research, and 4 weeks of synthesis, and then another 2 weeks of ideating, and another 4 weeks of actually designing and developing the experience, right? And then we would want to go into like this iterative state to kind of hone in on the minimum viable product. And so that's essentially what is the leanest version of the product we can design that's going to deliver the most value, right? And perhaps at the lowest cost. And so what is that lean version of this app need to be, that we can begin to test it with real users and get, but also deliver a valuable impact to the end user as well. And so discovery and framing, right? How do you understand what needs to be built, and how do you build it the way that it should be built? And so Natalie Dunbar, one of my real life mentors, she talks about design or discovery is where all the heavy lifting happens, right? And so in that discovery phase, we're really trying to do a good job to understand what the problems are, who the users are, what the existing technology is, what are some possibilities. And so we'll look at, and then also developing like the cross-functional relationships, right, within an organization or the ecosystem. So who's doing what, right? Like in an ideal world, you'll have a department or people who will specialize in certain areas like content strategy, marketing, branding. How do we align on these core ideas or on our business goals together and work together to kind of move the product forward? So UX is iterative, right? And so we kind of approach it in this framework of thinking, making, and checking, right? And so we want to think about the product. So that means like conducting exploratory and generative research, doing contextual inquiries. And so observing people in context, interviewing them, domain modeling, so on and so forth. And then we want to make something for what we thought about. So we want to create wireframes, low fidelity, high fidelity mockups, prototypes that kind of help us to visualize some of our learnings, and then we want to test that. So we want to check it, and so we want to do usability tests. Does the interface make sense? Develop hypotheses and start to prioritize, some of our findings. And so, yeah, think, make, check. That's the iterative process. Why do we iterate? So we work within like these iterative cycles to reduce risk, right? So reduce risk of spending time and money building products that do not deliver meaningful or impactful value to the business or its users, right? And so as time goes on, right, you risk building the wrong thing if you're not taking the time to pretty much analyze what you're building, get feedback on what you're building. And so I think they call it continuous learning, right? And so setting up these feedback loops and design sprint cycles to actually iterate on what you're building. And so if we were to go back to this double diamond breakdown, essentially what we're doing is we're building empathy, right? And so that research is really empathizing with the product, with the users up front. And so that's diverging, right? And so diverging, we really want to expand our thinking to explore a wide range of like ideas and perspectives, possibilities without immediately narrowing down solutions, right? And so a lot of us, want to jump right to the solution. So, this app or this feature will be really cool, without actually either validating that or generating more ideas around that, right? And so, again, diverging, we want to build empathy, and then we want to converge on all of that information that we gained, right? And so as we're synthesizing that information, we're doing affinity maps, we're clustering ideas, we're identifying problems, then we can start to define what those problems actually are. And usually problems in software or in business in general are something that's causing the business to lose money, right? And so going back to the example of this person who's abandoning their shopping cart, right? The business is losing out on money because the customer is either confused about pricing or surprised, right? Their expectations are not being met towards the end of that journey. So we want to center our definitions around how the business is losing money because of the design's impact on the customer, if that makes sense. So again, just really, are we designing the right thing, and are we designing things the right way? So let's kind of dive into, and I think I have about 15 minutes or so to kind of get through this, but let's look at what it means to diverge, right? And so we're going to get into more of like the research side of the design process, the empathy side of the design process. And so to me, research cultivates empathy, right? Um, so what is user research? Well, Einstein would say if he had an hour to solve a problem, he spent 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solution. Right. So this kind of speaks to the importance of really trying to understand the problems that you're solving. And again, the solutions will come, right? But how do we really understand what it is that we're working on? A more technical definition from the Nielsen and Norman Group, user research focuses on understanding user behaviors, needs, and motivations through observation techniques, task analysis, and other feedback methodologies, right? And so, again, interviewing, observing, asking the right questions, right? These are all surveys, right? These are all ways to conduct exploratory or generative research. So why do we want to understand our users? Well, I think first is we want to solve real problems, right? We don't want to solve problems that are hypothetical or that we're assuming, right? And so we don't want to assume, we want to validate. So we don't want to assume that we know their problems, our users' problems. We don't want to assume that they'll behave the way that we want them to. And we don't want to assume that we've thought about everything, or we want to do the work to actually think about everything. We also want to understand our users to align the team, right? So research fosters synergy within the product team, and it also removes bias. It brings clarity and understanding to what problems we are really solving, and then it also validates the assumptions that we have going into the product or project. Again, it saves money, right? Understanding our users, it saves time, money. So here's an example. I believe Courtney gave this example to you guys yesterday, or to some of the students yesterday, where Epic developed and launched a system that was supposed to help detect sepsis in patients, right? But they deployed the service and it caused actually more harm than it did help, right? And so the sepsis model was rolled out to hundreds of hospitals as an AI tool to catch sepsis early, but independent studies later showed that it missed about 2/3 of the sepsis cases while still generating a huge volume of alerts, right? So now hospital staff are a lot more overwhelmed. So in practice, this means that there was a lot more work. The workload increased for some of the staffs. They had to engage in more meetings and also reconfigure like some of like the systems within the sepsis model, right? And so with limited benefit to the patient, this is exactly the kind of waste of time and money that better upfront UX research could have prevented, right? So if they would have taken more time to actually do contextual work and observational work to understand each hospital, their needs and their process of diagnosing sepsis, I think they could have saved a lot more time and money. In this case, financial data wasn't disclosed. And so in a way, I am assuming that they did, it did cost them like money, right? To kind of go back and reconfigure to actually develop the tool. And I'm assuming that the hospital also have to pay for this service, right? This is not something that's included within their like Epic model or their subscription. And so again, building features that users don't need or want leads to wasted development time and resources. UX research, some of the benefits, early testing, like interviews, usability tests, identifies what features matters the most, ensuring developers build the right thing from the start. Again, this chart kind of illustrates the relative cost to fixing bugs based on the time of detection. And so the earlier you can kind of test, the rollout of your software, the cheaper it'll be for you to fix the problems, right? And the longer you wait, the more expensive it's going to be. Again, why do we want to understand our users? Because it's user experience design, right? And so users are the experts in their problems. If you're not studying users, you're not practicing user experience design, right? If you're not observing users, you're not designing a user experience. And so it's really about the user, no matter if they're a customer or an employee, right? Or staff, right? These are the people that we're designing for. And so we have to consider them as we're designing. And so Mr. Wonka says, are you a user? Well, please enlighten me on your experience. So what do we need to know? It depends, right? When we're looking at a user's experience, we want to consider the context, we want to consider the people, we want to consider the activities, right? And so good UX studies all three of these things, right? So on the left is a model showing a person with a physical, cognitive, and emotional layer surrounded by the tasks, needs, and situations, right? On the right is a system they're interacting with, right? And so we're thinking about the people and the systems, right? How are these people functioning within the systems or the ecosystem that we're designing for? So again, UX considers all three of these things: the context, the environment, the constraints, the policies, the people themselves, so their skills, their emotions, their motivations, the activities they're trying to complete. And so if we only look at the system and ignore these three dimensions, we end up designing for the interface instead of designing for real human behavior, right? And so how do we understand the human within these systems? So who are our users, right? Going back to what we need to know, the business, the customer, or the consumer, the developers, right? Doctors, patients, nurses. What are their demographics? Do they have prior knowledge of the system? Culture, education level. These are all important things for us to know while we're designing. Some internal factors: personal history, mental models. How do people perceive things? Likes, dislikes, moods. So what are their habits? Do they use social networks? What sites and products do they use? Media consumers or producers, right? So what is their relationship with the products? What are their relationship with the people or each other? So we need to know goals and tasks. So what are the activities? What is the user trying to accomplish, right? So in a general sense, I need to see a doctor, right? When might they use your product? And so, maybe they're laying in bed and kind of figuring, trying to figure out what's going on. So they want to do a quick Google search, right, to find the doctor. So what tasks must the user complete to accomplish their goal? Are there any pain points in the current task flow, right, or of their journey? So what's stopping them from completing the tasks that they're trying to complete, right? So what are their activities and what's kind of in their way from completing those tasks? Some internal factors like the context, location, distractions, devices, relationships, right? So objects and people, relationships, also people and people. So again, how do people interact with the objects? How are people interacting with the objects, and how are they interacting with each other within a specific context? So where are they assessing from? Are they working? Are they at a library, in a public setting, in a car? Are they distracted? Again, are they sitting on a couch? Are they, hiking on a trail? Where are they? And where are they when assessing your product or service? Again, how are they assessing it? Is it a web browser or operating system, desktop, laptop, mobile device? These all contribute to how we would think about designing the experience, right? Broadband or slow connection all contributes to your thoughts as you're designing. So when are they visiting your app or service? Is it morning? Is it night? Is it routinely? Like, is this a daily user? Or are they only on the app, maybe once or twice a week, a month? Is it during a crisis or an extraordinary time? Yeah, so you can imagine like how to start thinking about the context that you're designing within. So this is a question or a couple questions, but one question is, so now that we kind of know some things that we should be interested to learn when researching users, I want you to think about like what information or assumptions would you like to validate? And I know some of the students yesterday went through like this assumption mapping exercise with Courtney. And so I think this will be a good opportunity for you to kind of think about how you will go about validating those assumptions, right? Based on some of the information that we got today. And so at this point, what we're talking about is generative research, right? And so we really want to develop a deeper understanding users and the problems that they're solving in this like discovery phase. So we're generating research by asking questions, right? By putting out surveys, by observing people in context, right? This is a generative form of gathering information. And a more evaluative form of gathering information would be once we've actually built something based on what we generated, right? Then we will evaluate what or how people actually use the platform or the service, right? And that's not in this slide, but the difference between the generative and an evaluative would be the generative is gathering information to build. The evaluative is once I've gathered that information and built something, now I'm testing it, right? And I'm gathering information based on those results of how people are actually using it. So one is in the discovery phase, the other is in the framing phase. Again, so kind of reiterating about how do we gather information. Today we're focusing more on interviews. And so I guess I should just kind of, reiterate these things. And so interviews usually are like one-on-one, and I'll go into more details about that as well. But, talking to people, observing people, contextual inquiries. So watching them in the context of working with the app, well, in their concepts as they're using the app or service, right? Diary studies, having people keep track or log their experience, card sorting. So this is a tool used in information architecture where we're trying to prioritize maybe features or navigation on a website. Again, surveys, more quantitatively, generating numbers and, concrete things that we can use to inform our design decisions, eye tracking, data analysis, and A/B testing, right? Like designing multiple versions of a layout or a button and testing to see which performs better. But for the sake of this call, we're gonna talk about interviews specifically. So how do you interview? What are user interviews? So usually it's a one-on-one conversation between a researcher and a participant and are qualitative, right? And so we're trying to get a qualitative understanding of how this person is feeling, what they're thinking, what they're doing as they're interacting like with the product or service, right? So it's recommended to have at least one interviewer and note taker present when conducting these interviews. And the purpose for that is so that the interviewer can be engaged in the conversation and you have someone on the side kind of taking notes, right? I think it's healthy as an interviewer to also take notes, but I think it's really important to be engaged in the conversation so that you can ask, better questions, right? Like you're involved, and I don't want to spit too much jargon, and I'm kind of drawing a blank on the word that I want to use, but just be engaged, actually care about, what you're talking about and ask probing questions. So again, it's more about the feelings, emotions, thoughts, actions, and context in these interviews. Some of the benefits is that it's very personal. It produces rich qualitative information. It enables the opportunity to explore like tangents, right? And so a good interview, you're gonna talk about all the things, right? But obviously it's related to the context of what you're interviewing about, but you really want people to open up and share their experience. So some challenges of interviews, right? So how do I craft the right questions? What am I asking? How do I ask it the correct way? And so AI is a helpful tool to kind of refine your thoughts with that, and even with creating your research plan. And so I would kind of draft like some high level thoughts based on my assumptions of what, so I would create my goals. We'll get to it, but again, making participants feel comfortable, actively listening, there you go, and avoiding leading and compounding questions. So what does conducting an interview look like? So you want to establish your research goal and create a plan. And so kind of going back to thinking about these assumptions that we have, right? Your goal should be based on your assumption. And so you want to frame your research plan around the things that you're assuming and the goal is simply to validate those things, right? And so how would you craft questions around what you're curious about based on what you're assuming these people are experiencing, or you're assuming this product or solution will actually like solve the problem. I butchered that. But yeah, so think about like how would I frame a research plan into based on my assumption into goals, and kind of create some objectives from there, and then start to structure like interview questions. And this is all helping to develop a research script and framework for your conversation. So usually interviews happen within should take place or should be between 30 and 45 minutes. And once you've interviewed all of your candidates, you will want to synthesize and analyze your findings. So again, your research goal and plans, you want to create a research goal based on what you're assuming. What is the desired outcome of your research? How will it help you understand the project scope or experience you're designing for? So goals are your guiding star for conducting your research, right? So create a research plan that outlines topics and questions that will be covered in an interview based on your goals, right? And so really honing in on what are your goals, like how are your goals developed based on what you're assuming. And again, using tools like AI to kind of help you frame that can be helpful. But going into the AI system with some rough draft or thoughts about how you would want to formulate that, I think would be a better way to do that, if that makes sense, right? And so helping the AI as much as you can to kind of draft this research plan. And so crafting the right questions, you want to thoughtfully write unbiased questions So consider what types of responses you might get. And so you want to kind of think ahead of the game. You want to write potential follow-up questions, right? And use your questions as a guide and not a script, right? And so a script, you need that in terms of having like the structure, but you don't want to be so bound to the script to where you're literally just reading off of the script, right? You want the conversation to flow. You want to be prepared and to have an informed, like active conversation with your interviewee. Um, and so something that can help you formulate these questions is, create a topic map of some of the things that you may that may fall within the context of what you're designing for. So here are some like topics like medical records or risk factors, symptoms, hospitals, doctors, right? Insurance, privacy. These are topics within healthcare that you can, begin to generate questions around. Um, And so asking good questions, we're going to get into some examples of what good research questions are or interview questions are, but essentially they're open-ended, right? They're about behaviors and not intentions. And you want to avoid leading questions. And so avoid compounding questions, avoid pointing out specific issues, right? You don't want to tell a person they're having an issue. You want them to tell you they're having an issue. And so here are some examples of open-ended questions. And so describe a time. You want to use words like describe, tell me about. So tell me about, the last time you did this, or share your last experience. You know, uh, yeah, share your last experience shopping for groceries. Recall a moment when you did X, right? And so you really want to use these questions to make people think um, and reflect and really recall like the experience. You want to put them in that storytelling mode. You want to so closing the questions. Here's an example of closing the questions where they start with how many times, right? Like, do you like or would you say? And so we don't want to box people into giving one word answers or really specific, like, yes or no answers, right? We want to leave them open ended for conversation. And so here's an example of avoiding compounded questions. And so when you search for doctors, do you make a list or do you keep track in your head, or do you bookmark top rated clinics in your browser, right? So a better example would be to think about the last time you searched for a doctor, right? Describe some of your actions and thoughts that helped you find the right one for you, right? So really think about the last time um, you were seeking medical attention. What was that like? Can you describe some of the actions that you took? Would be a more open-ended way to kind of approach this. And so avoiding pointing out specific problems. And so most people try new supplements by recommendations. What are your thoughts on that? Right? You don't want to give people the answer or like lead them in, like this dead end framework, right? In basketball, they say don't dribble into the corner because you're dribbling into a trap. You don't want to dribble into a trap. Uh, and so some techniques for interviewing. There's this breathe technique by Natalie Dunbar. She talks about being present, right, in the moment, reflecting back to what you hear, right? So paraphrase meanings, check for understanding. Like, am I hearing this correctly? It's okay to have a person kind of reiterate what they're saying. You want to empathize with the person you're speaking with. So really center yourself within their context and their shoes. You want to ask clarifying questions. You want to take your time, so don't rush your responses. Silence is okay. Again, hold space for silence. That kind of leads into that second point. Or emotion. Some people may get emotional because you're asking, deep and intimate questions, right? And so you want to hold space for that and, embrace that. So engage fully with curiosity and openness, right? And so this brief technique can be a good tool for you as you're thinking about interviewing for your research. And so again, permission is important, right? Consent. Always ask for permission if you're recording. Explain the reason for your interview. Explain that their answers are confidential. And if solo, you could take notes, but don't be consumed with your notes, right? Like, I think it's okay to take notes, to jot some things down for your own recollection, but you don't want to be so consumed in it to where you're not engaged in a conversation and just like looking down, and that's not a healthy interview. Okay, so we're coming to a close here. So you're successful when the conversation is flowing and feels normal, right? Get interviews, create space for stories to emerge. So the moment a participant shifts from short answers to stories is the tipping point in the interview, right? So you got a person and they're just yapping away, you're doing a good job in the interview. And so stay engaged with that. And yeah, I think that concludes the presentation for today. And again, you have access to this research plan document. We didn't get a chance to look at that directly and kind of filter through it, but I'm definitely open to anyone who wants to kind of work through that offline. You can feel free to reach out to me and we can set up some time to kind of think through what that research plan can look like. But I just wanted to really get through a high level overview of what UX is, what are some of the frameworks and practices, what is user experience research, and how do you kind of set up some of these initial tools and processes to gather some information from your users as you're building the platform or your products or apps and services. So we can open it up for a couple questions, and if I'm not able to answer the question directly, I'll definitely take note of it and get back to you with a more informed answer that can help lead you in the right direction. But again, I just want to thank you all for being here today and listening to me ramble a little bit about UX. It's definitely a pleasure to serve you all in that way. So thank you.